Hey everybody, welcome to another Street Epistemology video review show. Got a bunch of great guests today. What's up, PineCreek, Anthony, Mark, and Dali? How's it going, guys?
Good,
there.
good.
Oh, going great today.
Here.
Yeah, excited about this.
Yeah, we are going to be watching a video from PineCreek from Doug that he released a few days ago. He had like a Q&A stream like last week at some point. I want to just give a quick setup of it, Doug, and welcome to the review show. First time here.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I do these very impromptu. Every live stream I do is impromptu, or usually. And yeah, so I try to have a video ready to review just in case nobody calls in. But I thought I would do a call-in show a couple days ago, and I had 3 or 4 callers. And the last 2 callers I thought were really, really good. I had one troll that was kind of interesting. But the last caller, especially, I thought was a really interesting conversation, and I think that's the one you're going to review today.
Nice. All right, cool. Let's get in straight to the video. And at any point you want to pause and comment, let me know and I'll pause it. Here we go.
Who might be watching right now haven't watched a lot of my videos and might not know. But yeah, I agree with you. I think if you watch my videos, you should know why I don't believe.
Yeah.
Are you a believer
Yeah.
in Christianity?
Yeah.
Can you, like, I can say I don't believe because I think the evidence doesn't match the claim. It's not sufficient. That's the reason why I don't believe. What would be the reason why you do believe?
Well, I think that I don't know of a naturalistic explanation for something like the resurrection. I don't think that there is one.
Okay. So it's basically the opposite of my answer.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it's, you know how much energy it took for me to hold back there and say, you don't know?
Right.
Like, I feel like going, douche. Now, I think he misspoke. And I think to give him credit, he does know, he just doesn't agree with those explanations. And I think he kind of says that later on. But if you're doing anything close to street epistemology, this is where you really have to bite your tongue and say, if you care about Christianity and if you've looked at the arguments opposing your position, you ought to know these things. But anyhow.
This might be why you hear arguments from people say, like, that's not a true Christian. You really need to get a true Christian on your program. Right? You need to talk to a real Christian.
If you had $1 for every time that someone said that to you, right? Oh,
gosh, yeah. I'm a little curious about your whole setup, though. Like, what inspired you to start taking calls like this just out of the blue? I'd be a little kind of worried that I'd be getting trolls. I know I've watched your show enough to know that you're aware of that, but
yeah, I don't know. I think maybe I was just getting a little bit bored of critiquing apologists, their videos. Maybe the number of videos of content that I was finding was going down. And so I just thought, well, okay, let's give this a shot and see if anybody calls in. I have a pretty low sub to moderator. In fact, I only have Reid as a moderator. I just made a new guy a moderator. And so I'm totally aware that trolls could come in. And so if I do more of these, I got to get more mods because, yeah, it could be nasty.
You have very good troll spidey senses, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully you'll get less trolls calling in once they realize that you don't really put up with them that much. And if they're not entertaining you, you just gone.
Yeah.
I guess you could assume both of us have approached this in something of a rational manner. And we've got pretty much the same set of evidence. And yet we've come to the completely contradictory conclusions.
Can I try something with you to get you to doubt?
Yeah, okay.
Love that.
Love
that. Hello. Okay. Listen, Doug just
for the win.
Doug just freaking comes out and just says it. And that's good. How do you critique SE if you have a practitioner who's literally saying, Can I ask you something that's going to probably cause you to doubt? I mean, I love that you did that. Should that be a best practice? Is that something that we should just put on the table as practitioners? What do you think?
That's a great question. For me, definitely, I think that's the best practice because no one can accuse me of coming in through the back door and robbing them of their contentment or whatever. It's basically I got consent to raise the anxieties in and get them to doubt and reflect on what they believe. And so
now
yeah.
I do notice that you go further and you say, I'm working on the behest of my boss, Satan. And you really take it and you just run with it. And then you spike the football and then you do all this other stuff, which is entertaining. But no, I do like that you just sort of laid it out on the line. And I don't know how you could argue about what you're doing when you ask these questions, when you just lay it all out there like that.
And I do realize that I will lose some viewers.
You think so?
When I say things like I work for Satan, like it does scare some people.
You'll probably scare away some theistic viewers. I don't think you're going to scare away too many atheists.
Oh, no. Yeah, the atheist viewers, they probably love that. But there's going to be some very conservative fundamentalist types who take that seriously. And in fact, there's some apologists have told me, Doug jokes about it, but he's actually right. Like he is under the power of the evil one. Yeah, a lot of them think this way. But the thing is, my goal here is to use humor because they can see me smiling, they can see me smirking. I'm purpose, and I don't hide this either. I'm purposely using this type of humor to make them numb to it, to be able to smile at their own beliefs even and relax a little bit and say, okay, even the Christian who believes in devils and Satan and all this, they're going to say, he's just joking around. Let's give him a shot. Let's listen to him.
Yeah, and you are in a very special context. You are on your show, your YouTube channel, which is a channel that you often critique apologists and people know what you're about. And it's a Q&A. It's, people are calling into you.
Yeah.
If me and Dali did what you did just then on like a random Christian in the park, that would be an interesting thing to try.
You should try it.
I think a few times I've literally said, I will ask questions that could result in you questioning your views and doubting. So I think I've laid it out on the line, but it's not a typical part of my thing. But with regards to how people might react to you saying that, hopefully they've watched enough of your stuff to realize that while that may be a goal and it may be what you're striving to do, a goal. They've seen you interact with people in the past where you are typically you steel man their position, you listen to what they're saying, you ask for clarification. So you're not tricking them. I think like you're really just kind of.
Oh, a lot of Christians would disagree with you there. They think that's all I do is gotcha questions, try to trick, that I straw man. And
really? Wow.
Yeah. A lot of apologists especially have said that to me. And so basically, tell me what you guys think of this. My response to that is just assume I will always straw man you. And then when I don't, you're pleasantly surprised. And it kind of sets the expectations really low. and they basically will think the worst of me. But then if they can just listen for a few minutes and hear me repeat back what someone has said, and if I'm like at least 60, 70, 80% correct, they're going to say, okay, not too bad. I was expecting him just totally straw man me, but it's close.
See, what I would say is if you think at any moment that I could straw man you or misrepresent what you're going to say, the second you detect it and think that it's happening, raise it so that we can talk about it. So I'm acknowledging that it's possible that I could do that, but I'm telling them that I'm open to hearing what they have to say so I can not do it.
Usually it's after the fact, though. It's like from people critiquing in the comment sections, third-party observers who are on the same team saying, oh, you strawmanned my Christian brother over there. And it's very rarely in fact, I don't think it's ever happened where I've interviewed someone, they said, you strawman my position. Yeah, maybe it has.
You have your reputation precedes you, basically. Is that kind of what you're saying? People think that you do that, and then they expect it, and then.
Yeah, I don't know. My philosophy in life, and maybe it's a defense mechanism, but it's keep your expectations low, and then hope for the best. And if you do that, it's really hard to be upset, sad. You don't get these negative emotions clouding your thinking.
I know at one point you were like steel manning a Christian at some point on some stream, and people came in and like were confused if you were the Christian or someone else was. I remember. I mean, you
I've
can
seen
do
that.
it. You can.
Yeah.
You can steel
You,
man.
you really inspired me with the Steel Man on one of those. I can't find it anymore, but you took it down.
Which
It
one?
was one with Chem Spears.
Oh, no, I think it's probably still there, but there's so many. There's a new channel called Cam and Cam with a C and Cam with a K. And basically any content that I've done with those guys is all in one YouTube channel called Cam and Cam now.
Cool.
I'll check that out. Thank you.
All right, let's keep going.
Can I
Nope. Oh, here's the video.
try something with you to get you to doubt?
Yeah, okay.
Is that all right with you?
Yeah, go ahead.
And earlier I talked about the flying man, but I want to do it a little differently this time.
All right.
So imagine someone really, truly believes that in history a man flew, and it was based on a cumulative case. And what would be the second best answer for why in history this man actually didn't fly? So we have a creed, we have martyrdom, we have 4 books written about the flying man and so forth.
So basically this is a calibrated question. What would be the second best? And you're looking for alternative hypotheses.
Yeah, and I kind of worded it badly there because I gave like a whole bunch of reasons, but for each reason that they believe Jesus Christ rose from the dead or that a man actually flew, what would be the second best reason for that one specific claim? And by the way, kudos to you, Reid. I got that question from you.
I was going to say
a year ago.
when I hear a second best question, I think that's Reid, and it's cool to see you using his question like that.
Yeah, and I usually use this mainly to find out, different ways of meeting certain needs or emotional or moral things, but it works just as well for, epistemology and reasons. That's great too. Cool.
Okay, so is the idea with the flying man thing that we have as much evidence as we have for Christianity?
Well, the same types of evidence. And
Same
so,
types, okay.
so imagine a person really, truly believing that the flying man flew.
Right.
But let's say you and I have God-like knowledge that's false.
All right, yeah.
What would be an explanation of how all that evidence could still exist, evidence in quotes, but we both know that, hey, it never happened in history? What would be an explanation for, let's say, the creed or the martyrdom or those 4 diaries?
I don't know if there'd be one.
Again, I had to bite my tongue here. It's like, and the thing is, in just mere minutes when Reid presses play, you'll hear that he does know of one. It's just, I think maybe he sees where this is going and is trying to, because he's already admitted about Christianity, he doesn't know of any other explanations for how we could have the evidence we have and a man didn't rise from the dead. So he has to be consistent now and say he doesn't know of a reason for the flying man. Maybe that's what he's doing, but he changes course here very soon, I think.
I was wondering in that situation whether he was trying to protect himself from either having an uncomfortable feeling or anxiety provoking experience, which I think he was on the path for, or not wanting to see himself in a negative light, or not wanting others to see him in a negative light. And at that point, I didn't know what, I thought he was trying to protect himself there from what was coming, what was about to.
I see it as evidence of compartmentalizing. To simply not know what's in that other box that you're supposed to deny.
I don't know if there'd be one. I think what the Christians are obviously proposing with Christianity is that God has done this.
Well, hang on. Let's stay off Christianity. Let's just talk about the flying man. Well, let's just take one thing. Let's say the creed. What would be an explanation for the man actually not flying? It's false in history, but we still have a creed that says he did. What would be an explanation?
When was this creed written and who by?
It was written about 20 years after he flew, and it was written by a guy named Myron. Okay, Reid.
Myron.
Yeah, Myron. Myron's my go-to name for everything. Myron did this. Myron did that. Myron works for the head office in Wichita. Can you rewind it just a bit, Reid? It was written about 20 years after he flew. Okay, yeah. This is where having some background knowledge in Christianity really helps, because sometimes knowing things about Christianity can hurt you if you're doing SE, but sometimes it can help you. And then here's, I think, a situation where it can help you, because I know with a high degree of confidence that this is what he believes about Christianity, that Paul was the first source written about in the mid-50s, about 20 years after the claim, and has said these things. And so I can have an exact parallel with the flying man. And by the way, I purposely chose a flying man rather than something else in history, is because I can mold it to whatever I want. It's not like they can Google it and then find, oh, but see, this is different. You know, if you keep it purely in the hypothetical, it's always better, but it's still a great thought experiment.
You not only understand the doctrine really well, it seems, that you also use words like you talk about Father God. Like, what would that, like, how would that resonate with the Father? So you're using this Christianese language or theistic language. I notice also when you're rolling out these hypotheticals.
Yeah, and I have to sometimes really swallow hard so I don't regurgitate the vomit.
Oh yeah,
the Christianese is like so repulsive to me now. I think it's even repulsive to a lot of Christians. But
it was really hard for me to stand during my angry atheist phase.
Yeah. Yeah, it was written by a guy named Myron.
Okay, what did Myron know?
What would be
what situation was he in?
What would be a possible explanation for you if that's all you knew at this point? That a guy named Myron wrote that 20 years ago, a man flew in front of 500 people to 12 people, and lastly to him, Myron. Now, what would be an explanation for that, given that it's false, that he actually didn't fly, but we still have the creed?
I think one possible explanation would be bad intent on the part of Myron.
Right.
Another one might have been some kind of misinterpretation of what Myron really meant, and I think that's more plausible.
Right.
I think the bad intent thing's pretty unlikely. It is possible.
Is it unlikely? I'm actually, at this point when he says, I think the bad intent thing is very unlikely, I'm salivating at this point, because we're now comparing someone lying as being unlikely compared to someone flying unaided as being unlikely. Like, those are the two unlikely comparisons. And we have so many examples in history of people lying and so few examples of people flying unaided. Like, really? That's what's going in my head right now.
When I heard this,
if I remember right.
Oh, go ahead, Dali. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. If I remember right, he forgets one of these two. He gave two options, and I think he even forgets one of them by the time we come back around to it. Go ahead, Anthony.
I was going to say, like, my impression, Mark, was different than yours. I was getting the impression that he wasn't really putting together the story that Doug was outlining, and thinking carefully about how he was going to answer it, so it wouldn't impact his view on the Bible or Jesus. Like, I got the impression that he was really trying to understand everything that Doug was saying with respect to Doug's own example, and he wasn't making the additional leap to comparing it to his God.
He hadn't made that yet. Okay.
Yeah, because this was only a couple of days ago, and I remember getting that impression. Like, maybe it was just because he seemed so sincere that I got that impression, but it seemed like he was sincerely trying to understand what Doug had to say, to the point where I was thinking that, what's the fellow's name? Did he give his name?
Yeah, I think Michael at the end, he said.
Okay, so yeah, that was my view, is like, I don't think Michael's putting two and two together to realize that he's essentially boxing himself in a little bit with regards to what he's also prepared to claim with regards to his God.
Maybe he's just actually at this point just being very honest and sincere. He knows exactly where it's going.
Perhaps.
And he basically says, okay, I value truth. I got to keep going with this thought experiment. and see if I'm consistent. And if that's the case, man, and
What
Michael,
else?
if you ever hear this,
Yeah.
kudos to you.
What else can you ask for? Like that's all. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this whole thought experiment is one big outsider test. If you want to
Yes.
stick with the lingo. All right, let's keep
Well,
going.
it's an outsider test, but it's a consistency test. Well, I guess an outsider test is a consistency test, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, where do we go now?
And
Okay, no, that's great. I love what your answer is, because you basically said, well, Myron could have lied.
yeah, he could have.
Or
I don't think it's a very plausible idea, but yeah, he could have.
right. So that's one explanation. And a second explanation for that, Creed, I think you said, is that maybe what Myron said was interpreted differently, that maybe they really didn't see the man fly, but maybe
So
just
Myron might have been writing fiction.
or no, he
Or,
could have, what he meant was, instead of, you seeing me right now on the screen, what Myron really meant was that people experienced the man flying, but it actually didn't see a guy fly.
Yeah, something like that. Some spiritual event and a metaphor.
There's a very specific reason why I said what I said there, because with the parallel of Christianity, people will say at a Pentecostal church that they've seen Jesus that morning, that they experienced Jesus, but they didn't actually see Jesus in bodily form. They just felt his presence during worship and so forth. And so that's the parallel I was making with the flying man, that when Myron's talking about the flying man, didn't actually see a guy fly. It's just like they had this belief in the flying man, and they experienced they could feel the wind in their hair, even though, it wasn't from the flying man and so forth.
I thought
And
you
if
were
you
being
a-
extra kind. I thought you're just, giving him a lot of leeway. Like, oh yeah, it could be that. Yeah.
That's a good answer too. Yeah, that's it. I was being kind.
Or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so we're both agreed that on that flying man, that those are possible explanations. Maybe not likely in your view, but I guess
And I think
my next question for you is, what is more likely, a man actually flying in history unaided, or a guy lying?
it depends if you believe in the supernatural or not before you come to that.
Wow.
Yeah.
What does that say? Hey, like you have permission to go with the least probable explanation if you allow the supernatural into the mix. That's essentially what he's saying there.
That's what he's saying, but I actually don't think, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that that's not what he really means, because I can tell you there are many Christians who do not believe for 1 second that all the miracle claims they hear actually happened. And especially ones from other religions. And if they do believe it, then they would blame Satan or whatever. But I think most believers do not believe every miracle claim they hear. And so I think his answer that, well, it depends on your view of the supernatural and if miracles are possible, that doesn't solve the problem. It's still more unlikely that a man flew rather than a person lied about a man flying. And you can even believe God exists, miracles happen.
So the steel man there would be like, okay, let's go along and say, yes, the supernatural realm is real, and it has the potential to interfere with reality. How probable is it that which is more probable? So yeah, I guess your example still holds up, even if you allow the supernatural as a.
And by the way, this is the biggest, in my opinion, one of the biggest powerful criticisms of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and that is, you can believe Yahweh exists and has power and does miracles, and you would still conclude, just because a guy claims to be God, claims to have, and people have said that he's done miracles, because you just look around you, your experiences, you do not see people rising from the dead very often. In fact, everybody listening to this live stream has never seen that. And so it's a very low prior probability, and to overcome that low prior probability, you have to have amazing evidence. And this is, what Reid says all the time, and what Hitchens coined as extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And just because a guy writes about it, that's not pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great point.
If
Let's
you believe
assume
that God exists and can make people fly, I don't think you have a meaningful way to actually evaluate the probability of that.
But I
it's
want to
definitely
ask.
plausible.
that's a good point. But let's assume you and I are both theists,
Right, right.
and we don't have any presuppositions against miracles. Would you still say it's more likely a man flew or that a guy just lied about it?
I don't know if we could actually evaluate that probability.
Well, no,
I
we're
would be more
evaluating.
willing- seeing how many people I see lie all the time, and because I've never seen anyone fly, I would prefer to believe that it was lie.
Right, I'm the same way. And remember, yeah, you notice what happened there? He said, "I don't think we can evaluate this probability," and then immediately he evaluates the probability on his own.
Yeah.
And he also said prefer to believe. That would be another kind of epistemology.
Yeah, that was I never caught that the first time. Listening it back now, that's interesting. He say, "I prefer to take the naturalistic explanation," is basically what he's saying, right?
Yeah.
No, I think is that it? Yeah, I guess so, more or less that's what it was saying. Yeah.
Remember, we're both theists in this hypothetical.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. The prior probability, before we even see the evidence, it's still, we have way more examples of people lying than we do examples of people flying unaided, correct?
Yeah, we do.
So wouldn't the explanation of someone be lying be better?
It would definitely be a better explanation. Yeah.
Okay. And how about the people, read texts and they reinterpret, they misinterpret all the time? Isn't that more likely than someone lying? I'm sorry, someone flying?
Yeah, the same thing would go
Okay.
with lying. Yeah.
Now let's shift this back to Christianity.
Ah, right.
See, right. See, I think he was going along with the ride that this was this hypothetical thing, and he wasn't understanding the implication it had for his God belief until just there.
Yeah.
What have I done?
I mean, you set it up. You couldn't have said it more clearly.
No,
Okay.
I'm not putting that responsibility on you, Doug, because you were very clear that what you were, at least for me, maybe because I've watched you do this a couple of times, but maybe he missed it. But I think it just dawned on him now.
And the criticism from Christians listening would be, I just trapped him, right?
It depends on how you handle yourself right here in this moment. Because if you said, hold on a second, I'm getting the impression that, well, I don't know how well you want to go with this. You may not have even noticed that he just realized that this was a corollary to what he's saying with regards to his religion. So it's kind of, this after the conversation quarterbacking can be really frustrating because you often miss these things in the moment when you're having them. It's not until after or when somebody is observing it that they notice, oh, that was an opportunity for you to warn them what they were getting into or repeat back what they said or something.
Yeah. Sometimes I actually tell them, I'm going to try to trap you here and just embrace it. But I didn't do that this time. But even just like this conversation right now, rewind 10 minutes ago, I had forgotten that, response from him. And so I gave him the benefit of the doubt that he saw it coming, but he just was trying to be consistent. So, right. But let's see what I say next. Yeah. The first things you said, 10 minutes ago, was that you can't think of any other explanation other than Jesus rose from the dead. On this one point, I want you to try to keep everything outside of this one point. On this one point of the creed, the very earliest source for Jesus' resurrection written by Paul, on this one point, isn't it more likely that Paul lied or what he said has been misinterpreted over Jesus actually rising from the dead?
To put it this way, if all the evidence I had was that one fragment from 1 Corinthians 15, I would probably not be a Christian. No, I think it's a combination.
That's not quite the question I asked you, though. The question I asked you is,
I love how you refocused that there. I love how you
want to give him 8 points out of 10 for actually addressing the question.
That was masterful because I think it would have been so easy just to let him answer the question he wanted to answer. Yeah.
Kind of. I'm answering the question that no, it is not sufficient evidence.
Well, no.
Clarifying again.
Yeah,
it's good.
That's a key admission for the thought experiment. It would not be sufficient evidence with just that one, and you can continue, and we'll see where that switches. We'll see how that goes.
No, my question is, what would be the, I'll just call it naturalistic. What's the naturalistic explanation for the creed other than that Jesus actually rose from the dead?
The naturalistic explanation for the creed on its own, it would probably have to be lying. I can't think of.
Or you mentioned another thing for the flying man.
That seems very unlikely, actually. Given
And he said that with the flying man too. Remember? I think he said that it would be unlikely that they would lie for the flying man. He's basically he is being consistent here.
I mean, I could get the text of it, but I don't see how that could be misinterpreted. Actually, maybe. Yeah, you've got a point.
Yeah, it's like
So
what you said with the
flying.
what you said about the flying man. You said the Myron who wrote the flying man creed could be lying, or what he wrote has been misinterpreted as actually seen someone fly. Maybe they just experienced or had this idea in their head that he flew, and maybe he really didn't.
Yeah,
and we're agreed that those same two things can be used for the creed in 1 Corinthians, right?
I think they could explain the creed there. Yeah.
Okay, we're on the same page. And so what I do is, I think this is the difference between me and you. I take that experiment which we just did, and I just apply it to each claim one by one. Whereas I think at some point you would say, no, if you keep adding other pieces of evidence, eventually the probabilities flip. Am I right?
Yeah, I think that the combination of that with other things means that there aren't any good explanations. And when you see people who, when you find certain books that are defending the resurrection, they don't use the creed in that way either. They use it to illustrate what was a very early belief of Christians.
I was correct how I I don't want to straw man you. Am I correct in how you evaluate it? You basically would agree with me on the creed, but if you keep adding stuff in, at some point the belief switch turns on.
I don't think it works.
Okay.
With all of them.
Now I want you to try to be me for like 60 seconds.
This was good. Yeah.
If I understand right, you're trying to head off the totality of the circumstances, the 20-legged stool response. Is that right?
Yeah.
Like you can use what we're doing right now for everything else that you think you have to bolster this belief. That right. I think you're teaching him this at this moment. Is that right?
Yeah. Basically, we could. I think I even said this. We could spend hours going through each piece one by one, and you're still left with the implausibility of the man flying or Jesus rising from the dead based on each piece of evidence you have for it. And just because you see, this is what happens, I think, with a lot of believers, probably in Islam and Judaism as well, is they got all these reasons and they almost think about all of them at one time. They very rarely do this exercise where they focus in on one at a time and pretend they know nothing at all about all the other stuff. It's like the veil of ignorance thought experiment. This is the only thing you know at this point. Would you believe it? No. How about we keep that and add something else? Would you believe it now? No. Okay, keep those two things and add the third thing. Would you believe it now? No. But at some point, the believer has to say, okay, by evidence number 36, the belief switch goes on for some reason.
Right. It's justification amnesia. They forget that they just admitted that they don't have a good reason for that belief, for that reason, and they set it aside, and they're reminded. They remind themselves that they have all these other reasons, and that discovery that they just had, that they can't rely on that one reason, evaporates. It seems it loses its impact for some reason.
Yeah, and then the propensity is to do whack-a-mole, right? They just new ones pop up when the other one is hit down, and and it's very tiresome and very inefficient, unproductive. This is the beauty of SC though, because it focuses in on the most efficient reason.
Yeah, but I think one of our biggest challenges today is to figure out how we address this objection, this shotgun thing, like the shotgun. There's so many things that prop this up. You just can't knock out one or two. We need to come up, I think, like a dialectical or a tool like the Tic Tac box or something to help illustrate this. Maybe the wheel with the spokes, that type of thing, could be helpful.
I think the flying man is its own Ferrari test. This is identifying thought terminating cliches that where the defense of this one is to switch to this one, is to switch to this one, and then they just go around in a circle, and then never any one of them actually get pushed down into type 2 thinking. They just keep staying at the surface and hopping around between.
It's like,
and I think your flying man example is the exact tool for this purpose.
But having him take the perspective of you makes him do the heavy lifting, where he has to. It makes him think about the strategy of what he's using with the whack-a-mole much more than if he's actually doing the whack-a-mole.
With his cherished belief.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a safe topic that Doug is surfacing, and Doug apparently has the view, and he's inspecting Doug's spokes. But we need to figure out a way to make it safe to overlay this wonderful example that Doug has set up and built and they're exploring to his view, to this guy's view. Oh, then there's Nathan.
Hey, what's up?
Welcome,
What's
Nathan.
up? What's up?
We
lost Reid. We lost Reid and got Nathan.
Yeah, I replaced him. No big deal.
I was going to say, Reid, you're looking very Nathan today.
I have a super squeaky desk here in Florida in my mom's place, so I'm like trying to touch stuff and not make a noise. But so I'll just be in the background for most of this.
Yeah.
I probably jumped in at the last minute, but I had to come check this out because I watched this before. I'm pretty sure I've seen this.
Yeah, we're only halfway through.
Man. Oh yeah,
and the best is yet to come.
Stuff.
It's great stuff.
Okay. And if you were to write out 100 pieces of claims or evidence of the resurrection, imagine you're me and looking at each one, just like we did with the creed, over and over again, but separately, one at a time. What do you think I would say to each piece of evidence? You're me now.
Yeah.
So let's take you name one besides the creed. Name just one specific piece of evidence for the resurrection.
The preaching of the early Christians that there was a resurrection.
Okay.
Which is in itself shown by the creed.
Okay. So
yeah.
So you're talking about the Gospels. I gotta stop saying so.
If I understand you correctly, I think you're saying "ba."
Yeah.
But you can say all that with one word, so, but it's a kind of a forced implication or something like, yeah.
So hard.
Earlier than the Gospels. It depends what date you put on them.
Why do you think he kind of turned obtuse here? Like he seemed to me that he just wasn't getting it.
Yeah, that's a good question because, if it were me, if I was the Christian, I would say, well, the eyewitness testimony of Peter or whatever, or the empty tomb, which he eventually got to. But it's like I think he was maybe overwhelmed at this point, that he just was maybe shell shocked that what just happened. I just admitted in front of maybe other believers that the creed is not all that. And so now I got to find the next piece to add on to this. And so maybe he's trying to think, okay, I got to be very careful what I say here because the next piece of evidence has to be really, really good because the creed was just shot down.
Right.
Well, we only have Paul's writings and the Gospels for Jesus.
Right.
Hang on there. I made a mistake there because some Christians are going to get mad to me. There's also the epistles. There's the writings of First Peter and so forth. But so I'm just saying that to keep the Christians happy. You need to pick one. Pick something very specific.
So Paul's creed would tell you that the early Christians believed in the resurrection as well.
Okay. Yeah, we already dealt with that
one. Yeah.
one.
So I think that.
What's another one? What's another piece of evidence for the resurrection other than the creed?
The Gospels and actually go with Acts. Go with the book of Acts.
Okay, be very specific. What in the book of Acts?
The preaching of the earliest Christians that there was an empty tomb.
Okay. So now pretend you're me and answer the question, what's the best explanation for the empty tomb from my perspective?
If you forget about, or
or the claim of the tomb, I should say.
Right. I think the best explanation for that is that the tomb is empty.
Okay, but what would I say to that? And think of how I respond to the creed and the flying man. What would a guy like me say about the claim of an empty tomb?
You might not actually deny that there was an empty tomb. You might have a naturalistic explanation for that fact, though. And there are proposed naturalistic explanations for the empty tomb.
Okay, let's do it two ways. Let's say there was an empty tomb, and let's say there wasn't. How would I explain both?
I can't think of a way that you could explain.
What are you hoping he says here, Doug?
I'm actually not. It doesn't matter what he says at this point. This is the beauty of the thought experiment, because if he says, "Well, okay, there was an empty tomb," I'm asking him, how would a guy like me? What would be an explanation for that? Well, you can think of many ones. Let's say there was actually a tomb that Jesus was laid in, and it was found empty later. And he says this. He eventually says this later. I think he says, "Well, someone stole the body." Okay. That's not an answer I would give, but that's an answer that a person like me would give. And isn't that more likely than a person actually rising from the dead and walking out of a tomb? So no matter what he says, the answer is going to be the naturalistic explanation. I shouldn't even use that word because that's triggering. The non-miracle explanation is going to be more likely than the miracle explanation.
To him, even to his standard, not even necessarily to you.
Right.
Yeah. To his own standard, he's going to recognize that it's more probable that something natural occurred than unnatural.
But I was hoping that he had watched enough of my videos to know that I doubt there was even a tomb to begin with that Jesus was put in. And so that gets back to the flying man. Well, the gospel authors said there was a tomb, but really there wasn't. And so just because a book says that something happened doesn't mean it did.
There not being an empty tomb.
Think about the creed.
Okay.
How did I answer for the creed? I said, or you actually answered and I agreed with you. You said that the author could be lying, or it can be a misinterpretation.
I don't think they could be lying about the empty tomb because it's very easily falsifiable in the situation that they're in.
No, remember, you're being me.
Yeah.
So if in the book of Acts it talks about the tomb being empty, a guy like me would say what?
I don't know. I don't know if there's an explanation for that.
Okay, I appreciate your answer. That's an honest answer.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I'd say, but first of all,
that was charitable.
When you say to a guy like me that you can't think of any other explanation other than Jesus rose from the dead, and then when I ask you, what would a guy like me say to certain claims, and you say, I don't know, that tells me that you haven't thought about it. You haven't thought deeply about other explanations. Yeah, see, Anthony just said I was being charitable there, but
I take it back.
But basically, I'm saying, well, I can hear you, Reid. But basically, I'm saying,
okay, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, that look, if this whole thing started with you saying you can't think of another explanation other than Jesus rose from the dead, and I'm asking you to be an outsider. And what would an outsider say? I don't know. Well, you haven't even begun to critically examine your beliefs if your answer is, I haven't even thought about this.
Yeah.
What the opposing sides would say.
That's right.
And
that's for any claim that we explore, whether it's religious or otherwise. If you can't verbalize what your conversation partner's objections are to your view, then you need to get out more and start talking to more people.
But the key is to be able to say that to someone live and not them get angry at you.
Yeah. How did you manage to keep this person on the call for this long?
It's charm.
It's obviously.
Because
besides that was very honest of you.
It wasn't charm. How do we know that?
No, I'm serious. It's the little things. Like, I really think the fact that throughout that whole conversation, I I didn't take an aggressive stance with him. Every time we were simpatico with each other, every time we agreed, I let him know that we're on the same team, we're on the same page on this particular point. So I build up credit slowly during the conversation, and then I can say this, and maybe the credit goes down a bit, but I still got some. And then I just keep chipping away.
Yeah, because you do work in your digs, but you build up, like there's this give and take.
Yeah.
But this is what you do. Like you check over your shoulder to see if they're still going along with you on the trail, or you're climbing this mountain together, right? And like you're giving him a hand and you're pulling him up. If he's lost, you fill him in, you catch him up, you make sure you're on the same page. And I think that's currency to an extent in these conversations, because people feel like they're being listened to and respected and being treated like a person. And you can make more progress in your conversation when you do that.
And maybe this is where I would disagree with some SE, is I think you should spend that credit once in a while. So in other words, being willing to take the risk of offending someone, spend a little bit of that credit, but and this is where experience comes in. You don't want to spend it all and then go into debt, right? You want to still keep some credit up there, but not be so nice that becomes almost disingenuous.
Fake. You don't want to be fake.
Yeah.
You can get away with an eye roll, or like, no, I don't think I'd really go along with that. You can give your opinion, but there's like maybe viewing it in terms of a ledger of sorts. There's this kind of invisible ledger going on, isn't there?
I think this is what makes Joe Rogan successful in his interviews, because he will spend that credit, and people will still say they'll get a sense that Joe Rogan doesn't hate you. Like, he can disagree with his guests, but they're still okay. And
he gets a lot of traction off of the fact that he's authentic.
Right.
He may say stupid things and promote things that are untrue, but he really seems like an authentic person. And he'll even come out and say, like, don't listen to me, I'm just a dumbass.
Yeah, and this is one of the criticisms of SE, I think, that I've heard, is that if you don't risk offending the person you're interviewing, you might come off as inauthentic, because you're basically always nice. You're almost too nice, It's like, maybe once in a while say, you know what, I think you're totally off here.
Yeah.
I like you as a person, and I think you and I would have fun golfing together, but man, I think you're way off base here.
And the ironic thing is that will probably endear, not that it's a tactic that you should consider, but I think that the liability to being yourself and just coming out and saying if you disagree with them, it's actually advantageous in the long run.
Yeah.
And you want them to be honest back to you. So if you put out a fake persona and you resist, there's a fine line, right? Because you can say something that could just completely submarine the whole conversation. You don't want to do that. But yeah, try to be as authentic and straightforward as possible. And hopefully they're looking at it as the whole picture and factoring all this other stuff that has happened prior to it, and they give you a little bit of leeway to allow that to happen.
And on my channel, at least, there's been examples where I've lost my cool and called people an idiot. And so when people see that, in a weird way, it lends credence that, okay, he's actually nice. PineCreek's actually nice to this guy, even though he disagrees. He can call people idiots from time to time, but he's not doing it now. So I guess, he's actually being sincere here.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question for everyone, because when we're doing SE or something like it, who do you think your audience is? I mean, do you think that you're doing this for the person who's in front of you, or are you doing this for the people who are watching it? When I do it, I'm definitely keeping in mind, I want to help, I want to do this as a benefit for the person. But I really try to think more in terms of how is Joe Schmo, who doesn't know anything about this, and they're watching this, is like, how are they seeing it? And I kind of think of that as my audience, and maybe that's not correct to see it that way. But how do you see it?
I think that's a great question. Yeah. Let's get into that.
I'll be very honest. I do it for myself. Number one, I get a dopamine rush from when someone says I don't know, or or that's a good point, or I agree here. I get a dopamine rush when two people with opposite polar worldviews come together. It makes me feel good. So that's my that's a totally selfish reason, but
Very
I'll
honest.
I'll cop to it. The second would be the audience.
Yeah.
And because people are more likely to change their mind in the privacy of their own homes when they're safe and they're just watching and listening. And then the third, it would be the person you're actually interviewing.
Yeah, there's three participants here, isn't there?
Yeah, forget yourself too.
There may be even more. What do you think, Nathan? What's your...
I think that's a concern that content creators are often thinking about, more so than like, if I'm not recording, then I don't think about the audience at all, obviously, because there's no one that's going to hear the conversation. So I remember driving for Uber and Lyft, and I would talk to random strangers all the time, and I wouldn't think about how anyone would think about the conversation. I would be thinking about either my benefit or their benefit. And I'm usually thinking of the question that would draw me to their understanding. What would get me to think the way they're thinking? And usually that question that would do that would accomplish that, gets them, if they don't have a good answer, to draw themselves to my understanding, which is questioning what they're saying.
I'm thinking about my audience, but not in a, do I want to maximize the entertainment value or something like that kind of way. I'm trying to create good teaching examples. And that means that I risk messing up. I want to risk messing up and showing them examples of doing it wrong and calling myself on it. But on the other side, I'm working on the best examples of SE, not on entertaining my audience first. But that's because of my goals in regards to creating teaching examples more than to create entertaining videos.
My objective, I think, is more for the audience to see the conversation and learn from it and want to do it, which is a little ironic because I think most of the people who view the videos will be using it in one-on-one scenarios where they are intending to impact the person that they're speaking with. Like that's first and foremost on their mind.
Yeah.
But the video is different, at least from my perspective. It's not so much about Dan that I was talking to and his friend. It was for the audience that would be watching Dan and his friend. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but at least we should be honest about it. You know, because like we're out here to make content to show people how to use this approach. And yeah, it would be nice also as a side benefit to help the person that you're talking with. But there's a larger, at least from a content creation kind of perspective, there's a larger goal here.
But I know, Anthony, you get that proud moments when you go to various live streams and you see people ask questions that you would have asked, right? And it's just like, yes, it's like, and maybe they never heard of you or heard of any SEer before in their life and they came up with that on their own. But I do think a lot of the street epistemology type channels people watch and they incorporate those questions when they're out in the real world or out on YouTube land asking questions. Whenever I see that, like I see, oh, this person is my subscriber. They're asking the exact same question I was just about to type, and I don't have to type it now. It's like,
oh no, don't get me wrong. That's amazing when you see people just using it and doing it better than you even do. Like I've listened to a couple of exchanges on the Street Epistemology Discord server of voice interactions, and there are a few people on there that are amazing at street epistemology, and they're talking about they're talking about immigration and like nuclear power in Europe or something, and they're talking about these very obscure concepts, but they're just amazing at the approach. But to just circle back on one thing, I do get a lot of value in the exchanges too. There is a egotistical aspect of it as well. When you have a good talk, and you like you said, you can see or you can get an indication that they're thinking about your questions, and they're grateful for it. They're actually grateful that you spent the time to do that. That's better than drugs. That's better than alcohol.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
But if I had to rank them, it would be audience, it would be my interlocutor, and then it would be me.
Just that reverse of me.
Is it really? That's so funny.
What about you, Reid?
Yeah, I do love it when people say, "Oh, I've never thought of it that way before." That's a great thing to see. And when people pause,
it's the pause. It's that
really
long
nice.
pause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to model this way of having a conversation and share it, and have that method spread throughout the culture. And I think what we're doing here on YouTube is people testing these things, just throwing stuff at the wall. And we have now a pattern. We've got this thing going with street epistemology. And Doug is like experimenting with like a very specific, counter apologetic style. And it's great to see. And we're just stealing whatever works, and we're just keep testing it. And it's really great to see.
On that note, we should probably tell anyone listening to this that feel free to take our stuff, modify it, experiment with it. Let us know if you found something that works better.
Mm-hmm. All right, a little bit left to go. Let's see what happens. Let me get back a bit.
What would a guy like me say to certain claims, and you say, I don't know? That tells me that you haven't thought about it. You haven't thought deeply about other explanations. Is that fair? Is that fair?
I'm aware of the other explanations, but
okay.
Right.
But yeah. you're okay. If you're aware of other explanations for the tomb narrative, what are you aware of? Let's take it off me right now.
There's the idea of a stolen body.
Okay.
I think the main way that non-Christian scholarship would be going now.
Okay, let's focus on that one. That's not
so
my
a stolen
answer.
Body would probably be that's one I can think of.
That's not my answer, but let's focus in on that one. Now, remember when we talked about the flying man? What's more likely, lying or a man actually flying? What's more likely, a body being stolen out of a tomb or someone rising from the dead and walking out of the tomb?
The body being stolen. Yeah.
Right. It's more likely
that's probably more likely.
Okay, so if we're just looking at the book of Acts and that one claim of a tomb being empty,
yeah,
aren't we left with saying just on that one specific piece of evidence that it's more likely that the body was indeed stolen rather than a man rose from the dead and walked out?
Yeah, we are.
See, and now we could do this for the next 10 hours for each individual piece.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do it for 10 hours.
No, I don't either.
but my point is
that can have multiple meanings.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it because of the implications, or I don't want to do it because it takes too much time or something else.
Of case starts to crumble. Because you're always left, it's what the mathematicians call it as Bayes' theorem, but what you're really left with is asking the what's more likely question for each piece. And just because we have a whole bunch of pieces doesn't make it more likely. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
I love this idea. Like, it's a cumulative thing, isn't it? Like, all of those spokes are he's adding them all together, and he needs I like calling that to attention.
And I teach my daughter math, and the word "and" starts with the letter A, and when you're talking about probabilities, when you use the word "and," you have to multiply the probabilities. When you use the word "or," you add them. And the cumulative
they're always
case,
less than one.
And they're always less than one. And Tim McGrew has ways around this. But anyhow, when you're adding, say you start with one piece of evidence, and we got this, and we got that, and wouldn't you know it, and we got this. You're just adding all these probabilities up, which actually hurt your case.
It lowers it. It lowers the likelihood of it happening. No, like I remember you do,
like the Ferrari test.
Mm-hmm.
Ferrari test. Yeah.
That's what the flying man is for in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
The way the Christian gets around this, or any theist, or any person, when it comes to these probabilities, is they will say, well, the probability, given the totality of all these pieces of evidence, it is still more unlikely that that Jesus didn't rise from the dead. Like they would just somehow flip the probabilities on its head. I know guys like Tim McGrew do this, and they say, well, it's actually 10 to the power of 34 more likely that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. Like they'll actually come up with numbers like this. And so even if you say that it's 1 out of 7 billion that a person would rise from the dead, well, we got the evidence that overcomes 1 in 7 billion. We got 34 zeros. And it's mind-boggling to me. It's like, well, nothing in history is everything in history is now certain, because you'll always have someone saying this happened and someone saying that happened. and you can just piece together a cumulative case for Mormonism or anything.
Yeah, this is also where it's good for someone to identify some type of disconfirmation criteria, like something to add to this that would shift them lower. And if they can't think of anything to even go from like whatever percent to -1%, then that's another thing to think about.
Yeah, and I have to constantly fight against myself in these conversations because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, everything we're talking about is not the real reason why you believe.
Yeah.
But you're telling me it is, so we have to go forwards. But I really suspect this is not it. And usually it's something more personal, more deeper, more emotional. And I don't say that in a negative sense. I think most of us believe what we believe for reasons other than evidence. Even though we like to say it's evidence, it's like, Reid can back me up on this one, or is Jonathan Haidt or whoever.
Yeah.
It's like we humans are terrible at believing things because of facts and evidence.
Yeah, there's so much even unconscious stuff going on. We're driven by our selfish genes. We're embedded in a moral community. So much stuff we don't even know. And just processing these reasons and then feeling comfortable processing emotional alternatives, it helps to.
Or if you're an apologist, you get paid to believe this.
Yeah.
Doug, I have to ask, did you ask in the beginning, like, what would your life be like if you didn't have this belief anymore, to test for that?
Not with this individual. No, I did not.
Okay.
But yeah, I do ask that often though.
Okay, yeah.
All right. A little bit left.
You might have a lot of explanations, ultimate explanations for each individual piece of evidence. And I definitely accept that there are plenty of those. I think where me and you would differ is that some of those is that there is no explanation that can actually fulfill all of those.
Well,
Naturalistic one, at least.
yeah, well, in my opinion, and this is where we disagree. If you agree with me, you're no longer a Christian. So if you want to stay a Christian, you want to disagree with me. But
why did you
my
say
answer
that?
would be
What?
that I said that again. My theory is keep expectations low. So it's almost using the backfire effect to my advantage. I'm saying you should disagree with me, and maybe there's a part of him that's contrarian that says, okay, I'm going to actually try to agree with him, to push back against. In order for him to push back against me, he has to start agreeing with me, because I told him you will disagree with me here.
Some reverse psychology.
Yeah, I guess it's a reverse psychology. But I don't, it wasn't a conscious thing. Okay, I'm going to say this now. I just said it. But in my experience, I think it's true what I said. If he starts to think like I think, even a little bit, just a scotch, as I would say, he's on a really rough road in the future. That this is a story, mostly a fictional story, mostly based upon a real character in history, probably a traveling preacher, using Old Testament texts as a template for creating a narrative, the story for this new figure. In other words, I'm saying Jesus represents a new Moses, which a lot of Christians agree with. They just think it's true.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Jesus is a new Elijah, a new Elisha. In fact, I think, I'm purposely saying this now because I want to find as much as possible places of agreement. And so since I used to be a Christian, I know a lot of Christians, what I'm saying, they're going to resonate with, they're going to agree with. And now they're stuck in a really tough spot saying, okay, here's this guy, this atheist guy who claims to be working for Satan, saying stuff I agree with. And they just have come from a paradigm where, well, the Old Testament's true and it points to Jesus, and now we got the New Testament. And I'm saying, using that exact same information that they believe and using it against them and saying, but this is a reason why maybe Jesus didn't rise from the dead, and people made this stuff up. Maybe not all of it, but a lot of it, to purposely fulfill some Old Testament scriptures, to create a new narrative, a bigger, better Moses, and so forth. And we see that in history all the time.
Here's what I'm wondering though: who is who is more of your focus here now, Doug? Is it him, or is it your audience, or is it you in this moment?
Yeah, in this moment, probably the audience.
Really?
Yeah,
I would have
because
him.
I can't see him. Like,
Yeah, that's true.
Sometimes I can see the person, and the audience can't because they don't want to be seen. But if I can't see their eyes and their body language, I got to assume I really don't know what they're saying and thinking. I just got to do my best by just the audio.
Yeah. All of us here, we're all human, and we love stories. We love to tell stories. I love watching whatever Marvel movies, and then like a decade later, it's like a remix and everything. It's like we tell the same story over and over again, and then we make little tweaks with genre fiction. Of course, that was happening back then. You know, there's Homer and all of that, and then back in Rome, of course, there's stories going everywhere, and it's like this is so obvious that this is happening. It's a perfectly good explanation. I don't understand how it's a problem coming up with alternative explanations.
Yeah.
And you are direct messaging so hard here. Holy
Right.
crap, you get away with some serious direct messaging. And he kind of invited it, but wow.
What do you mean, Dali?
You are arguing from an alternative position. You are, if you were in one of our practices, I would call you on direct messaging. But the thing is, direct messaging is only suppressed because it generates resistance. It generates blowback, backfire, defensiveness. And you're somehow managing to thread the needle and not just get a huge blowback on the resistance side.
Doug is
this is an example of it's amazing. This is an example where my usual concern about direct messaging is like, now PineCreek's a purple belt. He can do it. He's allowed to move F3.
But
nobody
else.
else.
It may have only worked here because of the currency situation that we talked about.
Yeah.
And let's give Michael,
he might be spending rapport, but wow. Yeah.
Like if Michael was Darth Dawkins or someone, like, no, this would never have happened. Like, I don't know if you guys know who that is, but yeah, let's give Michael a lot of credit for being
he's on our server.
Sincere. Yeah.
Darth is an active member of our server.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, that's okay. It's an interesting prospect. He's actually valuable to us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We're going to have to implement this like rapport, ledger into the course at some point. It's like the
maybe so. Yeah.
I think this is the most advanced level of like keeping this balance and just keeping it slightly a bit over, because when it's right there in the middle, when someone is feeling uncomfortably comfortable, that's where believer vision is most likely to happen.
But don't do it at the expense of authenticity. Like, you still want to be authentic, but don't be making these moves because that's the best way to get the person to think about your questions or something. Like, really just try to just be authentic about it, but be cognizant of the implications that authenticity can bring on your progress.
Mm-hmm. All right, a little bit more.
New Elisha. In fact, I think all Christians, many Christians who use the Old Testament as proof text for Jesus as Messiah are admitting, they're admitting that the New Testament is using the Old Testament, or that they're admitting that Jesus can be found within the text of the Old Testament, which is a big red flag that, hey guys, maybe the actual events didn't happen, and that narrative just said it did to fulfill certain things. And sometimes when I say fulfill, it can also be a person of expectation. So Moses did this, but Jesus did this even better, or the rules were cast out the lepers outside the city. Jesus welcomed the lepers and so forth. Like see, hang on. This is part of the credit building, because I am quite sure Michael agrees with everything I'm saying. And so this might be why maybe SE to Muslims is better done by an ex-Muslim, because they can build this credit. I know where you're coming from. I know what you believe in this area, or I think I know, or I have a good idea. And
it's a form of Rappaport's rules a little bit. He didn't exactly say all of this, but it's building his case for him, and he's going to agree, I assume.
I think I could see one area where this could backfire, where let's say, Doug, you are actually more knowledgeable about this guy's book than he is. That could, and you're using all these examples where he's like, I never heard of that story. Oh, that's in the book. And if he thinks that he's at a disadvantage with you on his own book, something that you've already dismissed, I wonder if that could make him more defensive because you're showing your expertise.
Maybe, or maybe not. He might say, well, okay, well, here's a guy who doesn't even believe this, and he knows more than I do on this. Maybe I should do a double look on what I believe. He could take that route as well.
Very well. Yeah. Possible.
Out the lepers outside the city. Jesus welcomed the lepers and so forth. Like it's brilliant writing, in my opinion, but it's a story mostly.
Okay.
So isn't that a very plausible explanation over a man actually rising from the dead?
I doubt
$1 million question.
parallels that you believe are there, I think are there. But yeah.
Okay, well, what we'll do is I'll contact the head office in Wichita, and they will send you out after you go off air. I'll send you a non-Christian placard. No, I don't really care if you stay a Christian, leave Christianity. All I care about is
You care.
that you think about these things, be able to steel man the other side. I hope I've steel manned your side, and be fair and kind to other people. I think we can
I
agree on
often what
that.
I've done here is actually denied Christianity. When you take each point of evidence on its own, yeah, there are definitely better explanations.
Yeah, and
What I think would change is when you start putting these things together.
that's exactly.
I live in Wichita.
Hey, Reid, the reason why I made that Wichita joke is because basically the whole conversation led up to that moment, and it was pretty heavy. And so I basically
Humor.
used humor to even just push it to the max and say, okay, well, now you're an atheist, so I'll send out a little thing out to you.
Everybody gets a T-shirt.
Yeah,
He becomes an atheist.
but it's obvious I'm joking, right? And so that kind of just lightens the mood, and so it's not so serious anymore.
Yep, because this is very serious to most believers. This type of questioning. So it's any type of humor, any type of levity is great.
But you said you didn't care, but I think you do. I mean, I think you.
I care about him
investigating.
deeply investigating and critically examining his own beliefs. But my family are Christians. I know people my wife is a Christian, and I know she gets so much out of the belief and would be devastated without it. And so I can understand that until they can find a replacement, you can do more damage than good if they leave the belief.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know his situation. Maybe he would be just fine if he left Christianity tomorrow.
How do you mean you do more damage than what? What do you mean?
There's some people out there who leave Christianity and they're a wreck. They need 40-hour-a-week counseling. It's like they get so much community out of the belief, and if they leave the belief, if they lose all their friends, if you're like 18 years old and you're dependent on your parents and you leave the belief and they kick you out, there's just so much at stake. And so I can't honestly say you'd be better off leaving Christianity, even though I believe it's false, because there's so many other factors out there. Sometimes, and this is where I might get in trouble, but sometimes believing a false thing can actually help you. And
well, that's another criticism of SE, that sometimes, if a belief is a support, and I have a house and we've taken away the supports of the house, and we don't put help with anything there, the house falls down, and we're not maybe doing that. And that, that's up for debate, but that's a criticism.
Like, can you imagine, here's a thought experiment for atheists. Imagine tomorrow, all of a sudden, everyone stops believing Christianity is true. This country would be a mess. I think. Yes.
The doctors would be busy, right? The psychotherapists.
They would be. I tell you, it has to be a slow process, because even all the community infrastructure and everything's set up for religion. And if you take that away, just pull the rug out.
Mm-hmm. Well, just in terms of the amount of people, homeless people that are fed through churches, that type of thing, right?
Mhm.
Like maybe there needs to be some sort of side effort along the atheist movement, the atheist community, the SE stuff of what gets slid into place as an option, as a replacement for these major services that these organizations are providing.
Like I had friends who were deacons in church, pastors in church, and the stories they told me of people calling them in the middle of the night, showing up, their whole family have no food, the church steps in and helps them. Imagine if all that went away. And like, I'm speaking to the atheists listening right now. You want to pick up that slack? Like you want to, like, how much do you really care about your fellow humans?
That's a big worry of mine as a humanist, recognizing that devastation that will likely happen if it's sudden, if it's drastic, if it's this maybe this is the best thing, like this gradual, slow, decades-long transition away from religion in this country is probably the smartest, maybe the most compassionate thing to do.
Yeah. Although that being said, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
This is why I spend so much time focusing on like the meta consent of the discussion in general, such as like how much would you want to discover that this isn't true if it weren't? If it weren't true, would you want to find out about that? And how would that affect your life? If you could discover that it wasn't the case, let's say you have a box that gives you the truth and you can open it and look inside, would you want to look into the box? And if you found nothing in the box, would you want to give that box to your family? Would you want them to see that it wasn't true? And why? Why wouldn't you give them the box? Why would you give them the box? And exploring that whole area with them is a way of wondering about what our minds and what our psychology would be like if it no longer held on to the idea. And another way to do it is like if you could spawn like a video game, either in like different worlds. One world, everyone's given the truth from the very get-go. Another world is everyone's given a comfortable lie, and some people discover what the truth is. And a third world where everyone is always stuck in the lie. Like, which world would you want to spawn in?
Yeah, I like that.
There's different like ways to explore.
It's the Matrix question, right? It's the red or blue pill.
Yeah.
And remember in the Matrix, that one guy, he basically said, "Put me back in the Matrix. I'd rather believe in a lie than have reality."
Cypher.
Yeah,
that's Cypher.
Fantasy is always better than reality, and I think that's why we evolved to have religion.
Wouldn't it be interesting if some of the major resistance that atheists are getting from theists, like apologists and so forth, are that they're not so much convinced that it's true as they are convinced that a major upheaval of a loss of religion of our population could have devastating effects, and that's their motivation for trying to propagate this stuff and slow us down.
Right. Like the morality is the below the method.
Like, let's get in the way. Let's slow this down. This is moving too fast. Let's throttle this back because we don't have the infrastructure in place to deal with this just yet.
Yeah. I was actually, to be honest, the last Pew poll that came out in 2019, where Christianity went from 72% to 65% in the US, that scared me a little. Like, that's a huge drop. And part of me was thinking, I hope that's moves up a little bit and slows. Like, we don't want the huge drop. But that being said, I'm going to push back against myself because I know some incredibly caring and loving Christians. And I bet if they left Christianity tomorrow, they would still be kind and caring.
Of course. And with the food example, with the food bank, you know, who's going to, I get that the churches mostly do that now, but could that be because that most people are in this country are Christian, and so that's who's doing it. And if most people were atheists in this country, then that's who would do it then.
You would think so. Like, if there's a need, there will probably be humans to step up to fill it. Especially if there's like a financial incentive. I guess when we live in a capitalistic society, right? It's like, so that humanitarian streak might be even spurred further if you know that you're going to get paid to do it or something. But yeah, hopefully humanism wins out, so we don't lose sight of the obligation that we have to care for the people who need it the most.
Yeah, there's tons of ways humans can seek prestige and charity and doing good for others is kind of a main way. And let's just have a pluralism of ideally secular ways of gaining prestige in a, positive sum way for society. We just need to work at it.
Yeah.
I think there's like 2 minutes left. Let's see what happens.
It's a joke.
All right.
But yeah, this is exactly where there's a guy named Mike Winger who's an apologist on YouTube. I don't know if you know him.
Oh, yeah.
And we used to talk a lot privately.
Oh, yeah.
On Facebook. Not a lot, but some. And I remember him saying exactly what you just said. It's like, yes, Doug, if you look at each piece of evidence, it can be doubted. You can say it's more likely that X happened rather than Y. However, when you put it all together, it's a cumulative case that's really strong. And this is the difference between Mike and me. This is the difference between you and me. I'm coming from the perspective that 1,000 bankrupt companies doesn't make one profitable one. And all these reasons, unless you're Trump, can be doubted. If they can't stand on their own merit and you just have 1,000 of them, you still have nothing. And I know you disagree with that, and I understand you disagree with that, but that's where it's at.
Right.
There you go.
Good talk.
That's nice.
Yeah, I'm thinking that we need to come up with the wheel and the spoke metaphor is really good, but there needs to be a better metaphor that shows that when you cut one of the spokes, that has implications for the other ones there, and they're not good implications. Like that spoke is cut and maybe it's dangling and it's flipping around. So every time it makes a rotation, it's banging into the other spokes and they are now running the risk of it. Or there needs to be some sort of, we need to
I don't think there's a easy way to do that. I think you basically have to do a hypothetical and go one at a time, and just hopefully after 2 or 3 examples, they see, oh, maybe my reasoning is wrong all the way through this.
See, this is where I think the scale comes in, because you could say, if that spoke was no longer there, what is your level of confidence? What would your level of confidence be if it wasn't there? And if they can verbalize that it would actually have a numerical, detectable impact on their confidence or the way that they act, their behavior, then they should allow it to diminish their overall confidence in the claim.
Even that I don't believe, though. That's another rationalization. That number, like even if they say it would change them, I still don't really believe them. I still want to go deeper into core psychological area and explore alternate ways to meet those, just to have them consciously there and then go back to the reasons. That would be, maybe it is an actual reason. Maybe they are conscious about it.
Do you have a degree in psychology, Reid?
I don't know.
Well, then you should be quiet. See, that's what, this is how the Christians will.
I do, and I say, listen to Reid.
Okay.
And Mark is a psychologist, right? What is your background, Mark?
I'm a clinical neuropsychologist. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because this is the complaint I get a lot is, that PineCreek guy, he just psychologizes. But then I hear these same people who accuse me of being a psychologist, they admit in other live streams that, it's the emotions, the psychology, the community, and so forth greatly impact what we believe. And so you can't win.
It's not a, theistic thing. It's a human thing.
Right.
Even for us, for a lot of things. Like, unless you've really thought about something and really explored the domain of expertise in that area, it's like basically social status reasons that we stick to stuff.
But here's a question for you guys. Oftentimes we ask, or I ask at least, what's the main reason you believe X? Do you think people have a good idea why they believe what they believe?
No.
Do you think that's an unfair question?
It's fair, because even if they just give you a reason because they think that that's a reason that makes that would sound good to somebody asking for a reason, there's still value in surfacing it, even though it may not, because then they can be like, oh, okay, that's not a good reason. They will probably stop using that reason the next time they're asked to give a reason for their view. So I think there's value in it, even though it may have been an on the fly sort of pick.
But given that it's probably not the real reason, what's the best way to get at the real reason?
Outsider tests, in my view. And like the flying man, I would say, imagine someone's believing in the flying man And the reason why they say they believe in the flying man is because of this book that was written or something. Like, just give an example. And you ask, okay, so if you didn't have that reason anymore, we took that away from you, would you still believe? And they say, yes, I would still believe in the flying man. What would you think about that person's thinking and how they got to their confidence level? And just putting it in an outsider test, trying to view what's happening internally to some other extent.
I think it's useful to help them acknowledge that they're using the reasons to bolster their confidence. So they're using it in one way, right? Like I am now more sure God is real because I discovered the ontological argument and I found it convincing. It moved me up. Them recognizing that if they were to discover that it's not a good argument to support their view, that it doesn't move them down. Why does it move you up but not down? That I think can help shed a light that there's something else going on, and it's probably a bias of some sort.
Yeah, and the outsider test allows someone to be tested for consistency, and consistency relates to like being able to be trusted within a tribe. Like, way back then, if you're not trusted within a tribe, you get ejected from the tribe, and that has a bunch of connotations.
Ooh, that might be a good question. What reason could you surface that you think would get you kicked out of your tribe? That might be a reason that might be a good reason to support the claim.
If you didn't believe what you believe now, would you have the same friends? I wonder how many people would say no.
I've had theists say, like, we had this discussion online and evolution came up somehow. And they then private messaged me. They didn't want to have the discussion about evolution in front of their other theistic friends, but they wanted to have it with me. I thought that was interesting. There are certain reasons that a lot of people don't accept, but they're not willing to publicly admit it because of the implications it could have for their membership in their tribe.
The question I've asked in the past to get to the main reason, hopefully, that a person believes a certain claim is you got 30 seconds left to live and you have a loved one right next to you and you're both going to die. You got 30 seconds left and you want your loved one to believe this. What do you say?
Yeah.
And so basically it forces the person to get right to the point as soon as possible. But I don't know how effective that is, because I've had someone say prophecy. Like, you got 30 seconds left and really you're going to talk about prophecy? No.
But I did something similar with that guy Caleb, and I said, like, I've always wanted to ask this question of somebody who says I have all these reasons for the belief, and I'm trying to think now. I think I said something like, what is your go-to response when you feel like you really need to convince somebody of the truth of this claim? And that's when he said something like physical protection.
Ooh.
Like, which is it's not miracles per se, and it's not the scripture, and it's not the historical narrative that has survived the test of time. It was something very near and dear to him that protects him.
And that I would believe and explore. I think that if you're a Christian listening, one of the best answers you could give to that question, 30 seconds left, you have an unsaved loved one. God changed my life. It's not too late.
Yeah. And that meets the psychological need for control of physical protection.
Yeah.
All righty. I think we've gone to pretty much almost 90 minutes.
This is good.
This is a really good show.
Yeah, it was good.
Perfect.
Doug, I love your stuff. Keep it up.
Glad I hopped in late.
Really good.
Thank
That
you.
was a good talk.
Yeah, it was fun.
Going to keep trying to do this every Sunday, maybe around 4 o'clock. We'll see, depending on our schedule. And feel free to give us any comments below with any videos that you think we should watch and review. Ideally, from the past week or so. It can be up to a month or whatever. But thanks again, everybody. You can see all of our info in the description, all our channels and stuff. And great. So, any last words, anybody?
Just thanks, Reid, for putting this all together. I know you do a lot of work behind the scenes, the thumbnails, setting all this stuff up. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure thing. Anytime.
And that's 4 o'clock Eastern now.
4 o'clock Eastern now. I'm on the East Coast. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, be on the lookout. Just subscribe, but hit the bell. And all right. See you, everybody. Thank you.